Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked where I climb the online series 12 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. In the previous episode, which I've linked down in the description below, I tried out this really strong team featuring Gigantamax Charizard, Assault Vest, Groudon, Zacian, and more. I'll be playing a couple more matches with it today, and details are in the description below if you want to try it out yourselves. And if you want to just skip to the battle, that's from the title and the thumbnail. That's going to be the second game today, so feel free to just jump to that. All the games are timestamped in the description below. Before we do get started today, I want to quickly point out that in the previous episode, I had said that the original creator of this team was a Japanese player called Snow. It turns out Snow is actually just using the team to get really high up in the ranked ladder. The original creator is actually a player called Rinya Kobayashi, who was the runner-up at Japanese Nationals in 2021. And so I have updated the description for the previous video to make that change. So my apologies to Rinya. I've linked his Twitter down in the description below. And once again, rent one paste if you want to try out the team yourself. So thanks so much as always for watching Road to Ranked. If you enjoyed, please share support by leaving a like. I'd really appreciate it. And obviously, we're still very, very far out from Gen 9, but I'm curious what your predictions for the games are going to be. I think for me, I'm really hoping and predicting that they're going to continue to improve some of like the quality of life changes that we saw, especially with Sword and Shield. And everyone talks about like a 0 IV bottle cap. And so that is personally, I think, a very easy thing for them to do. And so I'm predicting that they will include that, but I guess we'll have to see. So yeah, let's get started. Getting into things here, and we've got Ho-Oh plus Dialga with Landorus-T, Gieleki, Rillaboom, and Grimmsnarl. So I feel like Groudon should be very good here. Has to worry about getting burnt by Ho-Oh though, which is the primary concern. Charizard's also okay. My best way to damage the Ho-Oh is going to be Max Rockfall from Groudon, or potentially getting the Trick Iron Ball onto it, thus grounding it, and then using ground type attacks. Main question is who I want to drop in this one. Because I think I want Groudon, Zacian. I don't think I want Gastrodon, primarily because of... Well, I guess this is interesting, right? Like, they have Rillaboom, but like, are they actually going to bring it into a matchup against Zacian, Groudon, Charizard, and Incineroar? It actually feels somewhat unlikely. So if I don't think Rillaboom's coming out, Gastrodon's actually a great pick for me here, thanks to Yawn. That's pretty interesting. Honestly, I'm not completely opposed to a Charizard Groudon lead in this one, with Zacian and actually Gastrodon in the back. Gastrodon is normally reserved for like the matchups against Kyogre and Rain teams, but the reason I like it here is because it can pressure with Yawn, and it actually has pretty decent damage output into the majority of my opponent's team. And I think that the team that we're using has pretty good anti-Rillaboom Pokemon, and so hopefully that deters my opponent from actually bringing Rillaboom. Even if they bring Rillaboom, it's relatively easy to deal with it since it's very, very weak into most of my Pokemon. So, we'll see. Either way, though, it's always cool to see Ho-Oh. And I think Ho-Oh is one of those Pokemon that hasn't been explored enough and has a lot of potential. You know, number one, just because of its matchup into Zacian. They do actually bring the Rillaboom. Okay. It's going to be Rillaboom plus Dialga, which I honestly don't mind. I feel like this is a pretty strong start for me, all things considered. The only thing that's interesting on turn 1 here is, do you try to go for a Trick Room with Dialga? Like, I would expect Dialga to max, maybe go for a max Hailstorm immediately to change the weather. The odds of Trick Room here feel relatively slim, to be honest. I'm not opposed to switching Charizard out into Zacian. And actually, rather than go for Wildfire, I want to go for an Airstream here to allow both of my Pokemon to get a speed boost. Because that allows me to basically outspeed... I guess Gieleki in the back could still be a little bit scary, but they don't have a switch into Max Airstream here. Dialga's their only thing that actually resists it, so yep. I am decently content with that. So since they actually brought the Rillaboom, we have to deal with it before I can bring out the Gastrodon. But in this position, I feel okay about my spot. What's interesting is I actually thought Groudon was a pretty solid max option in this game as well, and I still have to be very careful about a late game Ho-Oh, but that's where Gastrodon's really helpful, because I can just put it to sleep. So we're going to bring in Zacian. Okay, they're not going to switch out either Pokemon. That works for me. My only fear here is like they actually go for a Trick Room on Dialga. So if I wanted to cover for the Trick Room option, I could have gone for a G-Max Wildfire onto it, but looking at their team composition, I don't know if Trick Room even makes that much sense because their team is decently fast. Like, you've got Gieleki. Grimm and Rillaboom don't really need Trick Room to operate. you've got Landorus, and yeah, there's the Dynamax. So ideally, they just, go for a fake out Max Hailstorm. I don't really care about the weather being changed because I can just bring the Groudon back in. Groudon will have a pretty good matchup into the Dialga here. So I think the lead matchup ended up working out even better than I'd expected here, which is always a, pleasant surprise. Okay, cool. They just go for fake out. Perfect. And Zacian's honestly not very important in this matchup because of its matchup into Ho-Oh, so I'd rather conserve Groudon, actually. And Airstream just gets the one-hit KO. Part of why I don't want a Wildfire here on turn 1 is also because I want to maximize the amount of residual damage I get out of it. And if I go for it on turn 1, like, I'm knocking out Rillaboom anyway, and Dialga takes such little chip, because especially because of grassy terrain being up as well, right? So, yeah. They're just going to opt for a Wormwind there. That's a crit. Yeah, we would have been in such a good spot because I was guaranteed a Wildfire turn 2. I mean, that's the only downside of clicking Airstream turn 1. Oh. Yeah, because we're definitely surviving that without the crit. And now my Zacian's attack is too neutral as well, so not getting the Wildfire residual is a really, really big disappointment in this one. And to be honest, it's going to be pretty difficult to actually come back from that. Because even if I just get one extra hit, right? Like, let's say Charizard hangs on with just a sliver of HP. The next turn, I can guarantee G-Max Wildfire, whatever is next to Dialga, and basically guarantee Wildfire up for the next couple of turns. Now, maybe Wildfire is actually not that important because they had a Ho-Oh, but that turn 1, for how good the lead matchup was, basically played out almost as poorly as possible. Losing Charizard like that is just a really big bummer. Now, I do have Stone Edge here on Groudon, but from my opponent's perspective, you obviously pressure me with Wormwind/Hailstorm and Sacred Fire from Ho-Oh. So you can just double up on a Groudon here, which is obviously really scary. Because of that crit, I actually have to just kind of go for some Hail Mary plays. So I'm actually just going to straight up go for the Stone Edge and switch out into Gastrodon here. If they double up on a Groudon, so be it. But, yeah, that's obviously a really, really tough crit, but it happens. And that's the slight risk I take in going for Airstream over Wildfire, right? Where I was like trying to maximize the amount of Wildfire damage I could take, or amount of residual damage I could do to my opponent. And as of right now, the residual actually doesn't matter as much as getting a second really powerful G-Max Wildfire off into Dialga, or a first G-Max Wildfire, because like we would do at least 50% to it. So then the interesting debate is on turn 2, if the crit didn't happen, they'd probably bring in Ho-Oh, and then it's a question of do you go for a Max Guard on the Dialga. Ho-Oh actually switches out, okay. Into Landorus, that makes sense. So, get another Intimidate off. And the thing is that Gastrodon doesn't even take damage from Dialga super well because it's Life Orbed, and so it doesn't really help me too much here. I am faster, but I also missed the Stone Edge. Okay. Less than desirable, that's for sure. They're going to max Hailstorm into Groudon, and we still take so much damage from that. Nice switch by them, though. They don't let the Ho-Oh, like, have the opportunity to get KO'd there. Although if they stayed in, they actually could have just doubled up onto the Groudon for a KO. But the Landorus switching makes sense. You intimidate both of my physical attackers. Get some damage on the board there. Okay. Yeah, nothing has really gone our way in this game, unfortunately. I also could have considered going for Wildfire on Dialga turn 1, because Rillaboom actually wasn't a big threat anyway. I just wanted to get rid of it to pave the way for Gastrodon, but Gastrodon's not really providing me very much right now, unfortunately. Could just go for an EQ here. I don't mind like trying to cover for them switching Landorus back out into Ho-Oh here. And since I'm so far behind, I might as well try to make some big plays. It's kind of hard to win this game by just playing safe at this point. Gastrodon going for Protect here was like the obvious play. So I'm hoping maybe they like think, oh, well, if I switch out Landorus here, I can capitalize off getting another Intimidate off on your Zacian later on. Okay, they do switch Lando. Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm hoping for. If you switch Lando into Ho-Oh and then like Gastrodon survives the attack from Dialga, it actually opens the game back up for us. But I do get the Stone Edge in itself, so that's already pretty good. And that is a one-hit KO. Okay. And they go for Max Quake rather than a Wormwind, meaning I get Yawn off as well. So we may have actually found a path to victory here, despite things going terribly in the early game. Because I'll get a Yawn off now as well. I will bring in the Zacian. Grassy terrain is up, so even if you're Scarf Zacian, I don't have to worry about Earthquake getting a one-hit KO onto me, which is a very big deal. I think the main thing to watch out for here is Dialga can use like Roar of Time to dunk on the Gastrodon, so I'd rather bring in Zacian and go for a double protect. Because Gastrodon is actually in a very favorable position against these two, and that's kind of why I wanted to bring it initially. But yeah, that last one, if I just went for a safe protect, I think we'd be in a worse spot, but managed to find a play to get back into it. Okay, not bad. There's the Intimidate. Yeah, I just don't want to risk taking any damage with either Pokemon right now, so I don't mind a double protect, I think. Just to ensure Dialga falls asleep, because we know they're Life Orbed. 2 turns of Grassy Terrain left, 3 turns of Hail. So, yep. I'm just going to double protect here. Any bit of extra Hail damage on either Pokemon. Well, I guess Dialga actually heals back from Grassy Terrain, but the chip on Landorus is always appreciated. Okay, so neither of their Pokemon are going to protect right now. Yeah, and there's Scarf Rock Tomb, I think. So they're trying to go all in here on KOing. Oh, I see. It was okay. Drop Zacian speed, KO Gastrodon, I suppose. Oh, maybe it's not Scarf. We outspeed it. Interesting. Huh. Well, I guess the idea was drop the speed and then you can just outspeed me consistently in the subsequent turns. That makes some sense to me. But the question here is, can you one-shot my Zacian right now? With Zacian, I'd rather target the Dialga slot, I think, because I know this turn it basically can't do anything. And I've got Ice Beam on Gastrodon. I don't think a Behemoth Blade KOs anyway, so here I don't mind just going for Sacred Sword onto Dialga and then just Ice Beam onto the Landorus slot. I'm not going to go for Yawn because Landorus can, of course, run Assault Vest. Okay, they have Protect. That's fine by me. My question is whether or not neutral Sacred Sword is a 2-hit KO onto the Dialga here. Nice, it is. Okay, that should actually allow us to win the game. Yeah, I think my opponent basically had a pretty good position, but then they gave up Ho-Oh for... They got a little bit greedy with Ho-Oh, especially because my Groudon actually outsped the Dialga. So if they just stayed in with Landorus there, they could have maybe picked off a KO onto the Groudon. But instead, they try to conserve it for Intimidate, and I get to punish the Ho-Oh switch in really heavily. So... I mean, I don't love it, right? Because I only won this in the end mainly off my opponent making a switch. If they don't make, I probably will just lose the game. So the good thing is I found a path to victory. But then the question is, can I have played any better? Now, that turn 1 crit was obviously really, really bad. And so I could have gone for Wildfire, although I don't think the Wildfire residual would have added too much. The main thing is trying to KO Dialga. So one argument you could make is just going for the G-Max Wildfire onto Dialga turn 1. But now you can see why I wanted to remove Rillaboom so much, right? Because Gastrodon in this late game was really, really strong for us. So Zacian's finally going to go for an Earthquake. So it did have Earthquake, and or Landorus goes for Earthquake, but my Zacian survives. And Ice Beam should finish off the Landorus now. So yeah. This was a game in which the early game was really tough. I mean, like, losing my max after just one turn is obviously never desirable. And I would have had a pretty powerful G-Max Wildfire on turn 2. The main debate, basically, on turn 2, if I don't get crit, is whether or not I target the Dialga slot or the Ho-Oh slot. And what it would come down to is how much my Charizard would take from a Life Orb Max Wormwind. Do I think I'm in KO range from a Brave Bird from Ho-Oh? If the answer is yes, then I have some incentive to target the Ho-Oh slot instead, just to guarantee Wildfire residual for the remaining couple of turns. But then the thing is, I actually don't get a huge chunk of damage on a Dialga, so then KOing Dialga might still be a little bit difficult. The one thing that was also a big deal in that matchup was that the Groudon was actually faster than Dialga, and that favors me substantially, because if it were slower, I think we would have just lost the game immediately, even with the switch that they made, because then the Dialga would just outpace my Groudon and then just KO me. But the fact we were actually faster than them gave us another window of opportunity, found it, and actually managed to get the win. But yeah, that was definitely a really scary game, and nice job on my opponent's end to actually bring that Rillaboom. I kind of got baited into targeting it. I don't regret it because, you know, if I can eliminate it early, Gastro feels a little bit better. But the main problem is that also by my Charizard going down as quickly as it did, it meant that I didn't have as many good ways to stall out their Dynamax on Dialga, right? Like, Dialga Life Orb with Dynamax, ideally you want to let it only pick up one knockout, but as soon as it picks up one KO, it accelerates the game so quickly, right? And Gastrodon can't really take attacks very well from it. So that one turn, like, it's just, you know, me hoping my opponent makes a very specific play, and they actually made it, so that works out well for us. But it doesn't feel great to be in that position because it relies on your opponent, you know, rather than you just like finding a play that covers for every option. But sometimes you need to assess the situation, and sometimes you're just put in these positions where you have to find that one specific play. So yeah, really cool team from my opponent with the Ho-Oh, though, even though I guess the Ho itself didn't do very much, but Dialga was just an absolute beast, and I continue to really like it as a restricted mon in this format. So let's keep things going. Game number 2 for today, and wow, ALCREMIE PALKIA, Calyrex, Ice Rider, Amoonguss, Mimikyu, Incineroar. Very, very cool. Going for Self-Trick with Iron Ball is an interesting possibility in this game. I have to worry about Weakness Policy Calyrex with Mimikyu, although that could be a bait and might be running another item like Lumberry, Life Orb, White Herb. Calyrex gets access to a nice set of moves in my opinion. Palkia is going to be interesting because Gastrodon can cover for the water type attacks pretty well, but like Max Wormwind still hurts. Zacian's weird here where if it's outside of Trick Room it can be very good, but inside Trick Room it's kind of abysmal. So the first question I have is, can I deny my opponent Trick Room? If they lead, there's so many combinations they could go with, like Instant Palkia. I mean, they have 3 Trick Room users. That in itself is really hard to deal with. They don't have any ground resistances or immunities, so like I think Groudon plus Grimm is actually interesting here. I think Groudon should probably be the max option. I just don't love Gigantamax Charizard when they have Trick Room. We actually could max Gastro in this one as well, potentially. Grimm, Groudon, Zacian. Do I really bring Gastro? If I'm not bringing that, I'd probably bring Incin, but I think my main fear in this game is where is my damage actually coming from? Groudon's okay, but they have Intimidate from the Amoonguss. Not the Amoonguss, from the Incineroar. And I really, really dislike maxing Groudon after it gets intimidated. Or even before it gets intimidated, because you can just switch in Incin and then like just neutralize my damage output pretty quickly. It's gonna be Palkia and Incineroar. Okay. Like, what do I want to do in this position? My opponent could just fake out the Grimmsnarl and max Wormwind Groudon, which is kind of a nightmare. They could also angle to set up Trick Room, but that would actually be kind of weird right now. So what I could do is actually read into a max Wormwind and then switch out into Zacian. That would actually give me a really big advantage if I somehow get this off. I don't want to go for Reflect yet. I want to stagger it if I can, but Thunder Wave is pretty useless here. I could always trick the Iron Ball into Palkia, but I don't really feel like that's necessary right now. I'm actually down to just Foul Play Incin for some chip damage, because that actually might put it in Sacred Sword KO range from Zacian. So the interesting debate here for my opponent is, are you going to go for Trick Room immediately? Even if you do, it's not the end of the world. But if they Dynamax and Wormwind into the Groudon slot, that would be my absolute dream right now. Okay. They don't go for Fake Out, which is a nice play. Oh, this is interesting. Parting Shot into the Zacian slot. I went for Foul Play, so if they bring out Calyrex Ice Rider, I would actually just activate Policy, but the funny thing is, because of Iron Ball, I'd actually just outspeed it and then KO it under Trick Room. Which is such an obscure, like, scenario, but very relevant here, actually. And then, yeah, that's part of the reason why I didn't want to max the Groudon immediately. Like, it's not like I can do that much damage in this position anyway, so might as well conserve it. Instant went before Palkia, so I would think Palkia's clicking Trick Room here. And it is ALCREMIE. Very interesting. Okay. Huh. So you can obviously go for Decorate. I want to go out in a Gastrodon now. Grimm is so useless right now, which is part of the problem. How could I play it around this lead? I guess Charizard could have knocked out Palkia maybe with Life Orb and Sun. That's pretty much it. The Intimidate is just kind of rough to play against right now. So Zacian out in a Gastrodon is intriguing to me. I've got Thunder Wave, I've got Trick. Like, I'm down to... I don't... Foul Play doesn't even do anything right now. Like, Thunder Wave at least gives me para chances. My dream would be that they max Palkia this turn. Okay, they do max it, so that's not bad. The question I have is the moveset. If I had to guess, it does have Max Quake. If you don't have Max Quake, you're actually in a really weird spot right now. Because Gastro can just absorb the water type damage. And then Warm Wind is, like, would you really have clicked Warm Wind into Zacian? So something like Decorate into Max Quake onto the Zacian slot is kind of what I expect right now. Okay. Yep. So there's Decorate. I mean, the goal is to stall out Palkia's Dynamax and ideally put it to sleep. They do have Max Quake, though. Nicely executed. Really cool combo here. They target Grim, though. Okay. But, like, it already might be too late for me. Because, like, you could just go for another Decorate and then just KO the Gastrodon. I guess the thing is, if I got the Para there, Grim would have survived and it actually would have put us in a pretty favorable position. But, yeah. The problem is, like, I'm left with 2 physical attackers right now, so such a cool combo here. The reason I didn't lead Charizard, by the way, was because if my opponent just leads, like, Amoonguss plus Palkia, yeah, Charizard can get a KO, but then they can just set up Trick Room. So, like, they have a lot of ways to enable this Palkia, and their decision to lead the Incineroar worked out even better for them. But I truthfully just don't have a very good answer into this setup. So, let me try to figure out how to win the game from this point. If we get a Para and Gastro outspeeds, gets a Yawn off. Ugh, I just don't see a good path here. It could be making a big play with Zacian right now and just attacking. Because if you're my opponent, you might just go, well, Zacian protecting here is fairly obvious. Let me just target the Gastro slot. Another interesting play would be to, like, max Quake into Behemoth Blade onto Palkia, expecting them to target Gastrodon. But then the thing is, I'm probably just going to eat up an attack drop on Zacian anyway, right? So is Yawn worth even going for right now is part of my question. I guess I will. Well, here's the thing, right? It's like, do we just gamble a little bit with Zacian right now? Because one path to victory... Oh, I don't want to yawn myself. Yawn... I am just going to go for Protect, but the problem with this play is if they just target Gastro here, I need to get a double Protect to even have a chance of winning the game. And even with the double, it's still pretty slim. Maybe it was better to just Thunder Wave Palkia, hope for Perils than that instead. But I wanted Gastro to underspeed it under Trick Room. Oh, oh, I totally forgot about Sweet Veil. Yeah, that doesn't work. So this is what happens when you go up against Pokemon that you, like, don't fight against very frequently. That's actually a really big upside for ALCREMIE. It's just been so long since I've actually fought up against it. I just really don't think I had a path to victory as soon as they got that first Decorate off. I needed a Para that turn to have a chance. Even if I get it, it's like, what do I even do? This is such a cool combo. Like, obviously I blundered a little bit with that Yawn, but I don't even think it would have changed anything. Like, I just did not have a solution to this core. Wow. Instant Palkia ALCREMIE. Very, very cool stuff here. I don't want to waste any more of their time, so let me exit the game and then figure out where I could have improved on. So, they have a lot of scary leads. Mimikyu Amoonguss, Mimikyu Incin. Because, like, if it is a Weakness Policy Calyrex Ice Rider, that's another mode I have to account for, right? But it makes sense for them to play towards Palkia. This is just really impressive. Like, you get Palkia to set up Trick Room. The turn 1 parting shot was really smart. There's no need to fake out Grimmsnarl there. And so that allowed them to get their ALCREMIE immediately to boost their Palkia the subsequent turn. So because the matchup is so bad here, my best bet in this game is probably... Now, if I wanted to counter, like, my opponent's specific lead, especially because I don't think that Palkia actually had Protect, Charizard plus Groudon would have been it. Because I would have just been able to pressure the Palkia slot with the Max Airstream on turn 1. The reason, like I mentioned, I didn't love leading Charizard plus Palkia was fear of a lot of, like, the Amoonguss leads that they could go with, right? So, like, Amoonguss... If you go with the Amoonguss, though, I suppose they can just go for, like, Heat Wave plus Precipice Blades, although that doesn't necessarily KO Palkia. I could also Heat Wave Max Groudon and Max Quake into Palkia. So, if I were to replay this game, I think I need to go with Charizard Groudon because I played primarily towards physical attackers in this game, and the Incineroar just, like, reduces my damage output way too quickly. And so, like, Charizard plus Groudon at least, like, can cover for Rage Powder from Amoonguss. If you lead Incineroar like my opponent did, I can just max Charizard. I guess the other question I have is, does Life Orb Max Airstream in Sun actually KO Palkia? Because if not and they get Trick Room up, it's still kind of dicey. Although I suppose I would do enough damage where then you can't max the Palkia. And with that team, like Incin and ALCREMIE are fully there to support the Palkia. And I would assume my opponent's last one was Calyrex Ice Rider, so that can clean up and be a pretty strong max option in itself. But yeah, that was just a really, really cool combo. And I had very little odds of winning that game, I think, given the 4 Pokemon I chose. It's like, given, like, my 4 against their 4, they didn't even bring the final one. I'm assuming it's Calyrex, but there was just, like, such little opportunity to actually win the game outside of maybe getting a para. So, like, my decision-making then is, like, okay, with Grimmsnarl, maybe I could be going for Thunder Wave onto Palkia rather than the ALCREMIE. But that's pretty much it. Yeah. And then, like, we're really praying for good RNG, so that's just, like, a stomp, and it means that I needed to deny, like, their main win condition, which was ALCREMIE going for Decorate onto Palkia. And I just, yeah, didn't really see it coming because ALCREMIE is not exactly a very common Pokemon. So it's one of the neatest combos I've seen in Series 12. Great execution by my opponent. They played the first 2 turns perfectly. And from that point, there's really not much I can do. So Charizard needed to come out in this matchup to at least give me a fighting chance. And with it not coming out, this was going to be very difficult to win. So yeah, let's keep things going. Third match of the day here, and it is, wow, Zamazenta and Solgaleo. So immediately I'm thinking, well, Charizard should be really good here. The couple things to watch out for are Dynamax Regieleki, Dynamax Thundurus, Brutal Swing Thundurus into Policy on the Solgaleo, Howl Zamazenta, Wide Guard Zamazenta. I don't really care about Behemoth Bash. Zamazenta also gets Snarl, actually, so I also have to be careful about that. Huh. Weirdly enough, like, Zacian's not very good here. I guess it covers for Dynamax Thundurus, Dynamax Aleki. The Behemoth Blade still just does a lot to those. I kind of want to go with play towards the Grim Charizard Groudon core. And then, like, Zacian's the obvious final choice, but I think Incin and Gastrodon can both be really solid here. Gastrodon because it's quite good into the electric types, so I can switch into it. And Incin because my opponent's running dual steals. I think Zacian's still too good to pass up on, but I could actually see us losing this game and then me reflecting on it and being like, nope, Zacian was actually not very good because it doesn't do much until the restricted, so we'll see. But I think Zacian's still just really solid into the rest of my opponent's Pokemon, and the Charizard alone should have a favorable matchup into the dual steals, so I kind of expect one of the electric types to get led here. Yeah, Zamazenta Thundurus. That works for me. So the thing is, I could trick the Iron Ball into Thundurus immediately. Or I could just reflect. I have to worry about what? Them going for Coaching or Howl? I guess there's no guarantee this is offensive Dynamax Thundurus either. Which is kind of interesting. And also, like, me switching Charizard out is fairly obvious. I can see my opponent going for Max Airstream rather than Max Lightning here. I'm not completely opposed to just trick on Thundurus, Max, and just Wildfire into Zamazenta. I think that's okay. Mainly curious about the Thundurus set here. They are maxing, which I actually think is a good thing for me. Either way, I'll be taking away a potential Life Orb from you with this trick as well. So, basically in my head, the way I'm thinking about it is, yes, your Thundurus will max, but first of all, how willing are you to go for Max Lightning? Because I have 2 ground types as a switch-in, right? I guess the problem, does something like a +1 Max Airstream KO Charizard? Because they can KO Charizard right now with the +1 Max Lightning for sure, right? And so that can be pretty scary. Even in that scenario, it's not the end of the world because I've gotten the Iron Ball into Thundurus. I'll be able to set up Reflect the next turn, and I'll have Wildfire ticking for the next couple of turns. I guess you could always just protect Zamazenta in this position as well. That's a possibility. Or just double up onto Charizard with attacks. But, okay, no protect, no switches. It's Lumberry, got it. Okay, and they go for coaching. That's fine. My main question is, did you go for Max Lightning here? Either way, though, to get a Wildfire off to start off the game is always nice, right? Because I get the residual for the remainder, too. We don't KO Zama here, but I think the residual should finish it off. We'll have to see. And they go for Airstream. Yeah. Nice. And they target Grim as well. Perfect. So we also know that your Lumberry on Thundurus, meaning that Max Guard is actually a pretty high possibility. Okay, there's the Wildfire. Ooh, I don't get the KO on Zamazenta. Okay, that's a little bit less than ideal. Would have preferred to get that knockout. I mean, you still have the Iron Ball, so it's pretty safe for me to just go out and a Groudon now. And just launch this Wildfire into Thundurus. That seems okay with me. If you Max Guard Thundurus, so be it. But glad to finally feature what Iron Ball can do. And I mentioned this when covering the team in the previous episode, but one of the other reasons you want to maybe consider going for your Iron Ball rather than like Lagging Tail is because the Iron Ball speed drop applies immediately. Okay, they do go for Max Guard, which is a good play. Yep. Snarl maybe? Okay, just another coaching, that makes sense. Because the thing is, now I guess you can bring in Regieleki, which would be pretty scary. So, yeah, that was a great play by them. The best thing I could have done around this was staying in with Grimmsnarl and clicking the Reflect, but I don't really mind this too much because both my Pokemon should outspeed Thundurus this next turn. And if you bring in Aleki, it's like, well, Groudon can just press with Blades, and the Thundurus is now grounded thanks to Iron Ball. Okay, they're going to bring in Incineroar, which, to be honest, does not really help their case too much right now. If they're bringing that out, then I don't think they have Aleki, so, which means Solgaleo should be their final one, right? But now I think they're in an even weirder spot. I can just pivot this out, back out into... I might actually go out into Zacian here, weirdly enough. Nah, I'm going to go into Grim. I was just thinking with Grim, like Thunder Wave, Reflect, Foul Play, those are all pretty nice right now in this position, but I don't think it makes that much sense. I could have also stayed in with Groudon, but I don't mind just resetting this Intimidate. If you're my opponent, one interesting play you can make is, I guess, going for a double Protect on Landorus. And they just go for Fake Out, perfect. That shouldn't even KO us, which is really nice. Because if I get the KO on Thundurus here, I don't think we'll get the one-hit knockout, which is totally fine. Never mind. Charizard, you're too good. I'm sorry for doubting you. This was just an Iron Ball difference, right? Like, my opponent only got one attack off. Turn 1 was a little bit scary because I made the prediction they wouldn't go for Max Lightning. But, yeah, it's, like, really, really hard to go for Max Lightning on turn 1 in this position when you know I have a potential Ground-type switch in. And they didn't even bring Solgaleo. They brought Ferrothorn. Interesting. I guess Ferrothorn makes some sense if your goal is to just eliminate Charizard on turn 1. Which is scary, though, because it means if they just KO Charizard with that Max Lightning on turn 1, I actually would be in a pretty tough spot, I think, but I'm gonna just Reflect now. The scary thing here is I can still miss all of my attacks, but with Groudon in the back, we should be okay. I'm down for Reflect into Protect here to get a free switch in. Because then Zacian has 100% accurate attacks, but yeah, they actually just end up forfeiting, which is fair. So yeah, I mean, here, they just had a really tough matchup. I mean, when you're using Zamazenta and Solgaleo, Charizard's probably one of the worst Pokemon that you can run into, so... Really cool stuff, though. AV on the Solgaleo, Sunsteel Strike, Rock Slide, EQ, Flare Blitz. Can Dynamax Solgaleo with the Salvest take a G-Max Wildfire in the Sun from Life Orb, Gigantamax Charizard? I don't know that calc at all. I would think so, but I'm not 100% sure. I also think my opponent would have been better off since they had Snarl to click Snarl the turn that Thundurus Max Guarded, because then you at least bring down Charizard's special attack, so then I can probably not get the knockout onto the Thundurus, right? And if I don't get the knockout onto Thundurus, the Thundurus gets one more attack off, and that's a really big deal. Especially since they brought Ferrothorn as their final Pokemon, they need to eliminate Charizard as quickly as possible, and in not doing so, you know, I just have a very clear end game against the Ferrothorn, which was indeed Leftovers, Iron Defense, Body Press. So, you know, this was the other reason why it's still not bad to consider bringing Zacian, because if I bring something like Gastron instead, I actually really struggle against this set. And so Zacian at least gives me a pretty definitive answer in a Ferrothorn, and Sacred Sword into things like Zamazenta and Solgaleo are also still, like, decent, right? Which is always valuable. Incin here, Citrus Berry, pretty standard stuff. Fake Out, Lariat, Parting Shot, Flare Blitz. And then Lum on the Thundurus, as we saw. Super Power Fly, Wild Charge. So what is interesting here is that it's not weakness policy Solgaleo, it's actually AV, and then Thundurus is not AV. That's a pretty common item on Thundurus, but Lum is really solid on this Pokemon because it allows you to take like Sleep Powders from Venusaur, for example, as well as deal with the Amoongusses, and also prevents you from getting burnt from Calyrex Shadow Rider, which is actually one of probably the main reasons you want to run it. So you can prevent a burn, max Airstream to then outpace them, and then just KO them the subsequent turn. And then focus Regieleki. This was actually one of the Pokemon I was more worried about given its matchup in a Charizard, but it's always tough to bring a Lecky into a matchup with Groudon and Gastrodon, which is, once again, just good team building and team synergy, right? So, yeah. Really neat team, though. Like, I really commend the Solgaleo Zamazenta core. That's not very common at all, and unfortunately, Charizard is just not a good matchup for this team, given that they've got 3 Steel types and only 1 Resistance in Incineroar, and Incineroar doesn't even take G-Max Wildfire and Sun very well. That's still like 50% of damage, so this team just, unfortunately, did not have a very good matchup in a Charizard, which obviously favored us a lot. So, yeah. That is going to be it for today's episode. Some really interesting teams, and that second team with Palkia and ALCREMIE, some really, really cool stuff. So, yeah, it was a nice reminder of ALCREMIE's ability just because I haven't seen that Pokemon in so long. But I have to say I was really impressed by it and how my opponent maneuvered in that game specifically. And so definitely some neat restricteds today. You know, we faced Ho in that first one, Palkia ALCREMIE duo in the second one, and then Zamazenta. And then Solgaleo didn't come out in this game, but, my opponent had it on the team. So thanks so much as always for watching. Leave a like if you enjoy. Don't forget to answer the question of the day, and I'll see you all soon. All right, peace.